Hi all, RetroTech Chris here again. So, in the past, I've loaded vintage operating systems on my HP T5700 thin client. Well, today we're going to do a factory restore of Windows XP Embedded. Here you can see the HP T5700 and just how small it is. Here on the back we have a variety of ports, including an Ethernet jack, 4 USB ports, line in, headphones, power in, video out, serial, parallel, and also system audio will play through the internal speaker, which we will hear later. So I guess it's time to shut down this Windows 3.11 for the last time as we prepare to load XP Embedded on this system. So when it comes to system restore, documentation, and downloads, there's nothing but great news. There's lots of documentation still available on the internet, and there's even a special tool that we'll see here, the HP Thin Client Imaging Tool, that will make this process relatively easy. And we can go to driverscollection.com and download essentially one file that will make the restore process a snap. By grabbing SoftPaq 29705, we'll be all set to go in just a matter of minutes. Now, if for some reason the driverscollection.com website becomes unavailable, you can download this SoftPaq using the HP FTP site. Now, word of caution, most browsers do not support FTP these days, so you can see me going through some contortions here. Additionally, the transfer does time out halfway through. This happened to me every time. Sometimes the HP FTP server did not let me connect in, so your mileage may vary and it's best to get the file another way, but if no other option, you can get it from this site. Here are some details on the SoftPaq. You can see the number as we discussed, and also that it supports the T5700, which is great, and that the operating system is Windows XP Embedded, and also that there are a variety of tools that are included in the image that we'll install as a part of restoring it, which is kind of cool. It'll get you all ready to go with your thin client. Also of note, you need a flash stick that is 256 megabytes or larger to get the job done here, which should be pretty easy these days. There are also 3 methods to get the image that we need to restore to the machine. We're going to use the third one here to unpack the contents into a directory of our choice, because as we will see here in a minute, using the USB drive option doesn't quite work, so we're basically going to roll our own method for that today. I also found this very helpful quick reference guide online, and while not specifically for the T5700, it did apply. You can see here that some of the highlights of the image are outlined, including some of the software that's included, including the Cygate firewall, which is quite interesting. We can also see that a user desktop and an administrator desktop will be installed, and we will be exploring both of these today. We'll also look at this Alturas deployment solution, or pieces of it. That's basically how you are able to install software on these thin clients. Here's some information about logging on, and this was extremely helpful because it told me what the passwords were, and also how to bypass user mode and get into administrator mode. So fortunately, that's all captured here, and we learn about the password for the administrator account, which we will need today. I was able to locate a bunch of drivers as well. There are various add-ons which work through that Alturas system, including removing packages and adding new packages, and we will be running those today as we go throughout the process. So the first thing we need to do for installation prep is get a thumb drive ready to go with the image on it. And what we're going to do is put a very small partition on this 16 gigabyte thumb drive that I have. 500 megabytes is going to be sufficient. We'll assign it a drive letter and format it as FAT. From there we can go ahead and finish out that process so that we have a partition for installing the image to. And we now have a new volume, drive H. Perfect. So next we're going to go ahead and launch that SoftPaq that we downloaded. So I can go ahead and accept the license agreement and we'll get things going here. Before long we get some options. Let's try USB format, though this is not going to work. We'll choose our newly formed drive H and click Format, However, you will see that this fails. So we'll go ahead and choose the deployment option, which is going to extract the files to a folder of our choosing. And I have a folder on the desktop called T5700, and we have put the files in there. So with those files extracted, we are now going to make a bootable USB drive. We're going to use UNetBootin to do this, and we're going to select FreeDOS for the distribution that we want, since the restore program uses DOS. From there, we can make sure we have the USB drive selected, drive H, and then we can go ahead and write the image. All set. So with that, we have one more thing to do to prepare this for boot, and that is that we need to copy over the installation files. So to do that, I have launched drive H, and we're going to copy the Flash and IVR programs over to drive H, so that we will now have a bootable USB drive with the files we need to perform the system restore. Also included in the distribution files that we unpacked was this very nice recovery PDF file that has great information on how to run the restore program. And if we scroll down in the document, we'll get the syntax that we need, and basically it's running this IBR, the name of the image, and we're going to use HD1 because we don't want to overwrite the USB drive that we're booting with, but that will get us good in booting. So with that, we're ready to install. First, let's go into the advanced BIOS features in the BIOS and make sure our boot devices are aligned properly. We want a USB to be the first device and ATA flash to be the second, and we don't care about the third. Great, so with that we can save and exit setup, and we can put our USB drive into the system and go ahead and reboot, and it will boot from the USB drive. So here you can see the BIOS splash screen again, and before long we will see we are booting from that drive. Here it is, default of default, which is fine. We'll see things load here. We're going to choose FreeDOS safe mode, and then from there we can go ahead and unpack the image and tools for deployment. So as we saw earlier, this is the command that we're going to need using HD1 instead of HD0. Let's go ahead and get that typed in. We'll go to drive C, which is our USB device. We can see our flash image there and the IBR program. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the process. IBR flash.img HD1 should get us going. From there we get to confirm twice that indeed we are erasing all data. From there the image will extract, and this process takes about 10 minutes and finishes in error, though that is fine, it was indeed successful, so we don't have to worry about that. At this point we can power cycle the machine. And we will see the initial Windows XP setup going into action here. Some first boot stuff here, some flags get reset, and we can see before too long we will have a Windows XP desktop available for our use. So with the restore finished, let's go ahead and explore a bit. Here we are logged in as user. We can see the different programs we have. We have some communications programs as well as some entertainment programs. It's pretty sparse, but this is a thin client and this is XP embedded. We have the Cygate security agent, which is actually pretty overbearing. More on that in a minute. Team NT and Internet Explorer, which we can launch. It's going to be an older version, and it's going to, well, act like an older version. So let's go ahead and try and navigate to FrogFind and see what we can find here. Let's go ahead and search about this thin client. Why not? So I'll do a quick search for HP T5700, and we'll see what we get here. And indeed we get some results, so I'm going to call that a success. And as we can see, we are running Internet Explorer version 6.0. That's a relic from the past, if I've seen one. So next, we're going to have a look at a really cool tool on this thin client, the HP System Information tool. And I really like this because of the detail it tells you about the machine. First, we can see in the top left there, we have system information, the BIOS version, the product name, the manufacturer, and CPU speed, a 1 GHz Transmeta CPU with 256 megabytes of memory, running Windows XP embedded, and the particular image. This is all very helpful for troubleshooting, as you can imagine. We also have drive C, and we have drive Z, which is a RAM disk. All user profile information gets stored there. For hardware, we have this nice Rage XL PCI card, and we can see more information about the processor again. and the fact that we have VIA audio, which is really a great thing for this system, and a VIA Rhine network card. And on the right-hand side, we can see which software is installed, which is particularly useful as we go through and customize the machine today. So at this point, I've decided I'm tired of being a user. I want to be an admin, so I'm just going to log out here. We'll just click log out, and I'm sure we can then choose a different username and log back in, and we'll be all set. Hey, wait a minute, what happened here? Well, it's actually mentioned in that user's guide that we saw earlier that if we log out and hold down the shift key, it will prompt us for login information. And I presume this is an XP standard. So let's go ahead and do that. And now we get the chance in just a second to put in the username of administrator and the super secret password of administrator. I wonder how many people cracked that back in the day if the default password wasn't changed. Anyway, before long we have a nice administrator desktop, and now we can actually do some things to customize the system. First of all, we can go ahead and right click and choose the properties menu, and we can have a look at, say, the video settings if we want. We can see we're set to a nice 800 by 600. That's good enough, but we can look at other things like themes, or we can look at the screensaver. Anyway, you basically get blank and starfied. Once again, being an embedded XP, the intent was to probably save space, so you have limited options. Okay, so from here we can go and look at some other items. For example, we can right-click on my computer and go to Properties. Can't do that in user mode. You'll see that nice support screen there, and we can go and look at the computer name, as well as the hardware, and look at the device manager, which is something that definitely interests me. And we'll do a quick pass through to look at some of the different devices here. I'll expand these pretty quickly. Feel free to pause the video if you want to look at the specifics. But one nice thing of using a restore image is that all the drivers are set up for you, as you can see here, and there's no additional customization we need to do for software drivers. Very nice. And at the very bottom here, we can see we have USB devices. Great. Let's go ahead and close out of that, and let's go ahead and get into my computer where we can see the various drives that we have for the thin client in a little more detail. But first, we'll try to add and remove programs, and you'll see that this requested feature is not available. Again, this is XP embedded and it's stripped down. And that's why we're going to use the Altiris system to add and remove programs, which we'll be demonstrating in the next section when we customize the system. Okay. Let's go ahead and have a look at drive C. And here we can see that we have some basic files at the root of the drive, and we have some items under program files. Not a whole lot, but we do have some things installed. And if we take a minute and pause here, we can also see that drive C has a whopping 55.8 megabytes free. So we definitely have to be careful with what we install. Next, let's have a look at the RAM drive. And as we go here, we can see that the user profile information is stored on the RAM drive, so whenever the system gets restarted, that gets wiped out. Don't store files there. Next, we'll have a look at the control panel, and I'm going to switch to Classic View, and we can see we have a variety of options. Several are HP branded. Let's have a look at the login manager, and with this we can choose whether auto login is enabled or not. I'm going to turn that off. No more shift key for me. We can also look at the RAM disk manager and see we have allocated 16 megabytes. Maybe we'll bump that down a little bit. I hope we don't run out of space, but we won't restart for now. We can also look at some other options, including this USB storage security options, where you can disable the use of an external USB device. I'm also going to customize the start menu. Because I don't like the XP one, I much like my programs listed in a row, so we'll go with the classic start menu here. Then we can apply those settings and we'll be all set for now. Great, so now we can look at sound and audio devices, and we can see that VIA AC97 configured, and also that audio is configured. However, I don't think that MIDI is going to work without adding an add-on despite what you see here, so we'll be adding a MIDI add-on here at some point today. Great, so that's the control panel. Looking at the system tray, we have an EWF program, we also have a Windows Messenger, volume, and then the HP Site security, which I promised we would look at. This thing is very restrictive, and what I have found is it tends to restrict you doing much of anything on your network. There's a nice little log viewer associated with it, but we will be uninstalling that so that we can have some capability. If we look at the desktop, we have the Citrix Program Neighborhood icon. So this would be used if you wanted to connect to a Citrix server. And it's very nice that this HP XPE image comes with this, so that you can just basically install a new thin client and you have this client ready to go to connect to your Citrix server. We won't set up a connection today, but it's kind of cool to see this on the system. So next up, we also have remote desktop connection. And similar to Citrix, this allows you to connect to a more powerful machine from your thin client. So now let's go ahead and take a few minutes and make this machine a little more customizable and usable. The first thing we're going to do is add MIDI support. And to do that, we basically just double click on this executable that I downloaded, and it takes care of the rest. It doesn't really even prompt you for anything, and lo and behold, it's done. We're also going to remove the TeamNT system since we don't really need that. So we'll go ahead and get that removed, and you can see the Altiris logo in the bottom right. So again, this is geared towards using that Altiris add and remove system. We'll also remove Citrix ICA because we won't be connecting to any Citrix servers. So that's going to be gone as well. And I'm also going to remove that Cygate agent that we talked about because it is really restrictive. So now we can go back to the Start menu and have a look at the programs, and things are looking a little meaner and cleaner. So we have just basically our communications and entertainment, Internet Explorer, Media Player, Messenger. So one other thing I want to have a look at is just how much space we were able to free up by uninstalling those applications. And it looks like we gained a healthy 7.1 megabytes. Great! Next, let's have a look at a few apps and also a cursory look at performance. Notice that I am loading a few of these apps over the network. And the first thing I'm going to load is an MS-DOS application because why not? It's cool to see that it's supported. I've chosen Wordy for DOS, and we'll get the guess right because this only supports one word anyway. Next up, I'm going to play a few seconds of Canyon MIDI for you, and I want you to note that the sound that I'm playing is coming directly from the internal speakers. Next, how about a game of 3D pinball? Let's have a play and let's have a listen. And now we can have a cursory look at performance. You see that I've loaded up CPU-Z here, and we have some nice information about the CPU and also about the caches here. This does have a total 512 kilobyte 4-way set associative level 2 cache, not too big, but I guess it gets the job done. As for mainboard, we can see we have a Transmeta chipset and a via South bridge. And for memory, we have our one 256 megabyte module. And then we have our SPD information as well. Looks like we have Micron memory in there. As for graphics, it's an ATI Mach 64 GR, Rage XL XC. Now let's do a benchmark, and we'll go ahead and benchmark against a VIA Eden 1 GHz to see how comparable it is. And we can see this is actually a little bit slower on CPU speed, but much faster on FPU speed. Kind of interesting, comparing one third-party Intel-compatible processor against another. And just for fun, we'll also compare it to a Pentium 200 MMX, though I wouldn't suspect running XP on that any day soon. And here's the About page showing some information about this particular version of CPU-Z. Kind of interesting that it is a January 2021 release. So that's my HP T5700. Restoring Windows XPE in about 20 minutes or less. I really like this little machine. It's pretty cool how capable it is, and I'm pretty happy with the performance of it. Thanks for watching.